welcome to everyone. Have a great evening today. We're going to start a new article called The Peace by Bala Salam. As you know, for the past several weeks we've started doing Bala Salam's articles, and we started with one of the major articles called Matan Torah, and we finished that off, and then we did the article Aravut, and now we have the third article that's coming up after these two, which is called The Peace. A very fundamental article, once again, by Bala Salam. These are very, very important articles for us to understand how reality really works, how we can attain spirituality, and how we can actually utilize the whole of creation so that we can expand our perception of reality and start perceiving a spiritual one on top of this corporeal reality that we perceive. Now, you can find this article on our website, kabbalah.info. And if you're watching on YouTube, they'll be posting a link to the YouTube page. Am I correct? Yes. Okay. So they've also got that link for you if you'd like to follow us while we read. This is a long article. It's one of those long articles by Bala Salam. So it's going to take us maybe 3-4 weeks to get it done. However, though, it's really important, especially for those friends who are newly in the group and they're starting to integrate themselves into a study group, depending where you are, virtually, obviously, under the given global circumstances. So these are really important for us to know, so we can understand our approach to the study and our approach, in fact, to reality as well. So without further ado, let's start the article. Once again, the name of the article is The Peace by Yehuda Ashlag, who's Baal HaSulam. An empirical scientific research about the necessity of the work of God. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lay down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people that shall be left, from Ashur and from Egypt, from Patros and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamat, and from the islands of the sea. Rabbi Shimon ben Halafta said, God did not find a vessel to hold the blessing for Israel, but peace. As it says, the Lord giveth strength to his people, the Lord blesseth his people with peace. So Bala Salam is making a bit of an introduction with a dilemma, because he first starts with the sentence saying an empirical scientific research about the necessity of the work of God. So one would suspect that we should be having an article that explains to us scientifically what a spiritual study should be like. And then he gives us something completely, something that really puts us out of whack and balance by giving us something from Isaiah 11 and telling us something which relates to biblical stories and biblical texts. So it's really hard to combine these things together. First of all, he says this is a scientific article, and then he brings us something really from the 5 books of Moses. So it just doesn't seem to make sense. A few things here quite quickly we should define for ourselves in terms of vocabulary. Israel is Yashar El, somebody who's directed towards the Creator. You guys probably already know that if you've taken the introductory courses, but just in case there is someone new watching. Israel doesn't mean the land of Israel on geography or in the Middle East. We're not talking about a country. We're not talking about a group of people who belong to a country. Israel comes from the word Yashar El. It means straight to the Creator. So anyone who directs himself towards the Creator is called Israel. So this could be anyone on the planet. It could be a Chinese person, an African, American, European. It doesn't really matter, as long as the person has that inclination and is directed in that way. So on the second part of that, where it says Rabbi Shimon ben Halafta said God did not find a vessel to hold the blessing for Israel, but peace. Here peace actually means perfection, wholeness. That is what peace means. Okay, so anybody who's directed towards the Creator, who wants to attain the attributes of the Creator, should discover a state called peace. Okay, so I suspect in this article, this is what he's going to try to explain to us. So obviously, anybody can participate in the spiritual study, and anybody can direct himself towards those attributes that he's talking about here, which the Creator has. So let's read and see how we get along. After having demonstrated in previous articles the general form of his work, whose essence is but the love of others, practically determined as bestowal upon others, meaning that the actual manifestation of love of others is bestowal of goodness upon others. Love of others should be determined as bestowal upon others, which is best suited for its content, aiming to ensure that we will not forget the aim. Now, when he talks about the previous articles, he's talking about the Aravut article, and prior to that, the Matan Torah article. So this is why I said this article is a continuation of Matan Torah and Aravut. So he's now saying that the whole essence of the work is the love of others, love of people, and the act of loving others is actually bestowing upon them. How we're going to get that is another story, but he says this is the goal, and we should be aiming for that, and don't you forget it. Okay, so this is exactly what we're aiming for, and there's nothing else that we need to aim for in the study. Now that we know for certain the conduct of his work, there still remains to inquire whether this work is acceptable to us by faith alone, without any scientific empirical basis, or whether we also have an empirical basis for it. This is what I want to demonstrate in the essay before us. But first, I must thoroughly demonstrate the subject itself, meaning who it is who accepts our work. So basically, Balsam is clarifying whether this should be a scientific thing or a person should just believe. Okay, so if you're a student of Kabbalah, if you're studying with B'nai Baruch, you already understand there's no such thing as I believe. Okay, there's a such thing as I discover, I attain, I understand, and then I believe. Okay, there we go. So let's see what he wants to say. But I'm not an enthusiast of formative philosophy, since I dislike theoretically based studies. And it is well known that most of my contemporaries agree with me, for we are too familiar with such foundations, which are rickety foundations, and when the foundation fluctuates, the whole building tumbles. Therefore, I have come here to speak only thorough critique of empirical reason, beginning from the simple recognition no one disagrees with, through providing analytically, separating the various elements in an issue until we have come to determining the uppermost topic. And it will be tested synthetically how his work, which is the Creator's work, is confirmed and reaffirmed by simple recognition from the practical aspect. So Baal Salam wants to make sure that we understand that we're not going to be using anything philosophical. In the wisdom of Kabbalah, there's no such thing as philosophy. You believe what you see. So he's saying here, I'm only serious about things that are practical, that are attainable, and that are well, pretty much known, seen, understood. So there's no room for philosophy, because the whole of humanity has been going from one philosophical model to another, only to find itself in greater misery and agony. So we definitely, in the wisdom of Kabbalah, do not use philosophy. We want to make sure that spirituality is based on visible, understood, known concepts that one cannot err with. All right? This is a very important topic, because a lot of things, a lot of methodologies, a lot of systems, methods out there, be it, spiritual methods, belief systems, whatever you out there, there are thousands of them. They mostly more likely than not tell you that you need to believe this. And in the wisdom of Kabbalah, Baal Islam is just saying here, listen, no, we first have to understand by observing life and nature how we can base the foundation of our work. Okay? So these things are very, very important, and one should understand that there's no such thing as just believing in the wisdom of Kabbalah. Therefore, I have come here to speak only through critique of empirical reason, beginning from the simple recognition no one disagrees with, through proving analytically until we have come to determining the uppermost topic. And it will be tested synthetically how his work is confirmed and reaffirmed by simple recognition from the practical aspect. So now we can move forward. So here is the first subtitle: Contradictions in Providence. Every reasonable person who examines the reality before us finds two complete opposites in it. When examining creation, its reality and conducts, there is an apparent and affirmed leadership of great wisdom and skill, both regarding the formation of reality and the securing of its existence in general. Let us take the making of a human being as an example. The love and pleasure of his progenitors is its first reason, guaranteed to perform its duty. And when the essential drop is extracted from the father's brain, Providence has very wisely secured a safe place for it, which qualifies it to receive life. Providence also gives it its daily bread in the exact amount, and it also prepares a wonderful foundation for it in the mother's womb so that no stranger may harm it. It tends to its every need like a trained nanny who will not forget it even for a moment, until it has acquired the strength to emerge into our world. At that time, Providence briefly lends it just enough strength to break the walls that surround it, and like a trained armed warrior, it breaks an opening and emerges in the world. Then too, Providence does not abandon it. Like a loving mother, it brings it to such loving, loyal people it can trust, called mother and father, to assist it through its days of weakness until it grows and is able to sustain itself. As man, so are all the animals. Plants and objects, all are wisely and mercifully cared for to ensure their own existence and the continuation of their species. But those who examine that reality from the perspective of provision and persistence of existence can clearly see great disorder and confusion, as though there were no leader and no guidance. Everyone does that which is right in his own eyes, building himself on the ruin of others. The evil thrive and the righteous are trampled mercilessly. Bear in mind that this oppositeness, set before the eyes of every sensible, educated person, has preoccupied humanity, even in ancient days. And there are many methods to explain these two apparent opposites in Providence, which occupy the same world. So, once again here, he starts rather nicely, contradictions in Providence. He's saying that life looks so great. Everything is created so perfectly. The still level, the vegetative level, the animate level, our body, how we're all built, created, everything is synchronized, everything is connected, everything is working harmoniously. However, though, that's just how we see it initially. As the world turns around and we grow up in life, we begin to observe that life is not so harmonious. It's rather complicated, actually, and we're right in the middle of that complication. So this is why for humanity it's a bit of a contradiction, because when we first created, everything is so nice. We've got people around us that care for us, that love us, they raise us, they do everything for us. But as we grow up, it's like, you know, they demand more from us. Society demands more, our parents demand more. Seemingly that loving nature is diminishing. So it's hard to make sense of all that. Everything was nice and comfortable, and all of a sudden we're now having an opposite attitude from life. So Baal Stam is saying, well, that's just contradictory. Why shouldn't things be nice all the time? If we're starting the whole process of life with these great tools, we've got loving parents, you know, nature gives us everything perfectly, why doesn't it continue that way? Okay? So for humanity it's a bit of a contradiction, because the process we're going through doesn't seem to make sense. Let's see what he'll be further explaining to us. So he will now mention for us a few methods that humanity came up with. So the subtitle, first method, nature. So humanity basically came up with methods to explain this contradiction. And he's going to now explain to us in general what these methods are. The first method, nature. This method is an ancient one, since they did not find a way and an outlet to bring these two conspicuous opposites closer. They came to assume that the Creator, who created all these, who watches mightily over his reality, lest any of it be cancelled, is mindless and senseless. Hence, although he watches over the existence of reality with wondrous wisdom, yet he himself is mindless and does all that senselessly. If there had been any reason and feeling in him, he would certainly not leave such malfunctions in the provisions of reality, without any compassion for the tormented. For this reason they named him nature, meaning a mindless, heartless supervisor. And for that reason they believe that there is no one to be angry at, to pray to, or to justify oneself to. So this was the first approach that humanity came up with. All right, from the side of nature. They're rather actually, you know, when we're talking about these methods that humanity came up with, we're talking about really sophisticated people who gave a lot of thought to clarify what the whole of creation is all about. So these people are, you know, very wise, very scientific. They want to come to reconcile the cause and consequences of life and reality. And because they couldn't reconcile things, they just came up with this understanding. Well, this is nature. It has done a great job in creating everything. However, though, it's doing a lousy job overseeing everything it created. So they called it nature, mindless and senseless governance of reality. The second method is called two authorities. Others were more clever. So as you can see, humanity, as generations move forward, is also becoming wiser. So they're beginning to add on, or to start to look at things from a different perspective. They're evaluating things differently now, because with every new generation there's an accumulation of all of the past plus renovation of the new. So the second method, two authorities. Others were more clever. They found it difficult to accept the assumption of nature's supervision, since they saw that the supervision over reality to secure its existence is a far deeper wisdom than any human culmination. They could not agree that the one who supervises all that will himself be mindless. For how can one give that which he does not possess? And can one teach one's friend while he himself is a fool? How can you say about he who performs before us such astute and wise deeds that he does not know what he's doing, and that he does it by chance? It is clearly evident that chance cannot arrange any orderly deed, devised in wisdom, much less secure its eternal existence. In consequence, they came to a second assumption, that there are two supervisors here. One creates and sustains the good, and the other creates and sustains the bad. And they have greatly elaborated that method with evidence and proof along their way. So as you can see, humanity is now coming up with a lot of options. So here we also have a situation where they came up with the good and the bad. It's like the devil and the angel. So as you can see, humanity is now coming up with two gods, okay, so one who's doing all the good in the world and one who's doing all the bad in the world, and seemingly they're like in conflict. It's like having a good angel on your right and a bad angel on your left shoulder, and this is how it's going to kind of, work out in reality. Okay, all right. And the reason they said that is because you can't have some creator or nature that creates everything so perfectly and then manages it so badly. So there must be two forces. Someone who's doing a really good job of, acting, behaving perfectly and so forth, or and someone who's, destroying everything. Okay. The third method, multiple gods. This method was born out of the bosom of the method of two authorities. This is because they have divided and separated each of the general actions for itself, meaning strength, wealth, domination, beauty, famine, death, disorder, and so on. They appointed each its own supervisor and expanded the system as they wished. So as you can see, after the good and the bad forces, what now happens is people came up with multiple gods, like Greeks or the Romans, who had multiple gods. They had a god for everything, or in Egypt, for example, or in some parts of Babylon. So where they had multiple gods, like in the Middle East, before all the religions, and they appointed a god for everything that happened to everything in life, from the seasons to, fertility, to the god of the sea, god of the sky, god of the gods, and so forth. And this is how, multiple gods were born. They just anointed a god for every force of nature. Once again, these are not silly things, because there's a lot of thought going behind any force in nature that has an impact on humanity. So every time life is impacting us, they're actually giving a name to that force. So from the one side of things, in the 21st century, it might sound rather silly, but if you think about it, all those years ago, to give every major event or the cause, let's say, the cause of an event, a definition, a name, isn't very stupid at all. We also do that in our lives every day. We define things, we attribute a name to something because it's a cause and consequence relationship, and that word explains to us what it is. So all those things that they couldn't explain, they gave a name to. So it's not something silly. We do this on a day-to-day basis in our life as well. So this is how everything developed with the multiple gods. We're also doing it. We can do the same thing for money. We can say, well, a lot of people attribute value to money because they think or they say or they believe that because of money they can do things. So money becomes a force, doesn't it? It becomes a power. So it becomes like your God when you're really obsessed with it. It could be the same thing for power. So when somebody's really obsessed with power. So all these things are actually also a part of our day-to-day lives. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking about Zeus or Venus or whatever. The fifth method. Now, he says the fifth method where, so he's jumping from the third method to the fifth method, and he hasn't mentioned the fourth method. So I don't know if he left it out of the article or if he deleted it afterwards, but we didn't touch the article. This is the original article of Bala Sulam. So from the third, he jumps to the fifth, so don't let that surprise you. This is how the article is. This is, we stuck to the original of the article. The fifth method left his operation. Recently, when knowledge increased and they saw the tight linkage among all the parts of creation, they recognized the concept of multiple gods to be completely impossible. Thus, the question of the oppositeness sensed in creation reawakened. This led them to a new assumption that the supervisor of reality is indeed wise and caring, yet, because of his exaltedness, which is beyond conception, our world is deemed a great grain of sand, nothing in his eyes. It is not worthwhile for him to bother with our petty businesses, and this is why our livelihood is so disordered, and every man does that which is right in his own eyes. Alongside these methods, there existed religious methods of godly unity. But this is not the place to examine them, as I wanted only to examine the origins from which the fouled methods and puzzling assumptions that vastly dominated and expanded in different times and places were taken. We find that the basis on which all the above methods were born and emerged from the contradiction between the two types of providence detectable in our world. And all these methods came out only to mend that greater tear, to mend that great tear. Yet nothing is new under the sun, and not only was that great tear not mended, rather it grows and expands before our eyes into a terrible chasm, without seeing or hoping for a way out of it. And when I look at all these attempts, all those attempts that humanity has been making for several thousand years to no avail, I wonder if we should not seek the mending of this great tear from the supervisor's point of view at all, but rather accept that this great correction is in our own hands. So with these methods, basically what Bala Sulam has done here is he just gathered what humanity came up with. There are thousands of belief systems, thousands of religions, methods of approaching life, philosophies, and so forth. But what Bala Sulam really wanted to do in the article was to just gather them and say, listen, these are we can gather everything that humanity came up with under these groups, and that's it. And that is all we need to do. So he's not really delving into the details of everything. He's just saying, over several thousands of years, we came up with a bunch of stuff, and we have still not reconciled our reality. Quite the opposite. We're in a bigger misunderstanding, we're in a bigger chaos and darkness than ever before. So here he's saying we need to take a look at things from the perspective of the Creator rather than our own perspective. Because for thousands of years, our perspective has not really brought about a solution to our dilemma, which is why we're living. What's the purpose of creation? What do we have to do here? all these questions and how we should be living and why life does the things it does to us have not been answered. So now Bala Islam wants to take us out of the box and take a look at everything from a different perspective. So let's carry on reading. Necessity to practice caution with the laws of nature. We can all plainly see that the human species must lead a social life, meaning it cannot exist and sustain itself without the help of others. Therefore, imagine an event where one retires from society to a desolate location and lives there a life of misery and great pain due to his inability to provide for his needs. That person would have no right to complain about providence or his fate. And if that person were to do that, meaning complain and curse his bitter fate, he would only be displaying his stupidity. This is because while providence has prepared for him a comfortable, desirable place in society, he has no justification to retire from it to a desolate place. Such a person must not be pitied, since he is going against the nature of creation. And since he has the option to live as providence has ordered him, he should not be pitied. That sentence is agreed upon by all of humanity without dispute. So now he's basically taking us through an introduction to the laws of nature. And he's saying humans are social creatures. And that's it. This is how we are. There's no going around it. We are social creatures. We live in society. We were born to live in society. We cannot live alone. We cannot take care of ourselves alone. Imagine living on a mountaintop on your own without electricity, water, without, a place where you can buy your clothes or your food. I mean, you just can't get by. It's just not going to happen. Your life will be full of suffering. So he's saying, if a person goes against the laws of nature, he is just going to be miserable. And because of his stupidity, we should not be, pitying him at all. So his new approach right now is to look at life from how our life is predetermined from nature. Because humanity did not choose to live a social life. It was created in such a way that it just has to have a social life, because we're born into a family. Unlike animals who get by in this world immediately after they're born. They're born, they're raised for a few months or a certain period of time depending on the species, and they go about their life. But a human being has to learn everything from how to eat to how to go to the toilet, from how to talk to how to walk. Everything in his life he has to be taught. So he needs others. He needs others to grow up. Whereas an animal, a calf, let's say, is up on its feet in a few hours. It already begins to suckle from its mother, begins to walk next to his or her mother, and that's it. Just gets on with life. Whereas a human being takes ages to grow up. And the amount, for anyone who's got kids, how long it takes for children to grow up and how patient you have to be. So for humanity, laws of nature need to be observed in such a way that, first of all, we're social creatures, and that law has to be kept. And I can add and establish it on a religious basis. When it's saying about a religious basis, it only talks about the wisdom of Kabbalah in this article. And give it such a form, since providence extends from the Creator, who undoubtedly has a purpose in his actions. Since there is no act without a purpose, we find that anyone who breaks a law from the laws of nature that he has imprinted in us corrupts the purposeful aim. Because the purpose is undoubtedly built over the laws of nature, none excluded, just as the clever worker would not add or subtract even a hair's breadth of the necessary actions to attain the goal, he who alters even a single law harms and damages the purposeful aim that the Creator has set, and will therefore be punished by nature. Hence we too, creatures of the Creator, must not pity him, because he is desecrating the laws of nature and defiles the purpose of the Creator. That, I believe, is the form of the sentence. So basically, Ba'al Salam is saying there's no mercy in life. You go against laws of nature, you can damage yourself, you can end up dead. You fall off a cliff, gravity is going to kill you. You get too close to fire, you're going to get burnt. You go to a place which is a bit too cold than what your body can handle, you're going to die. So there are certain laws, there are certain things, forces that are acting on humanity, and you can't bend these laws. You can't run away from them, or you can't not abide them, otherwise you'll just get hurt. So first of all, he's taking the perspective of looking at things from the laws of nature. So when he makes here when he uses here the word religious, establish it on a religious basis, like I said, he's using the wisdom of Kabbalah, because religions don't talk about laws of nature. They talk about God and what you have to do, and that's it. And then according to that, what you're going to get in your afterlife. So here he's basing it on the spiritual basis. That's what he calls religion. And he says, listen, this whole thing is based on the laws of nature, and we can't base it on anything else. Because the minute you start basing things like this on philosophy, or on a person's mental approach or interpretation of something, then that's it, game's over. You're never going to get it right. So he basically wants to say, listen, we're created in nature, or we're created in this reality, and certain laws in nature are keeping this nature. There's a system that's working. So there are laws that are functioning in nature, and if you don't keep them, you'll get hurt. If you keep them, good on you, because you'll move forward. And this is what he wants to teach us. And I believe that it is not a good idea for anyone to contradict this form that I have given to the sentence, because the words of the sentence are one. For what is the difference if we say that the supervisor is called nature, meaning mindless and purposeless, or saying that the supervisor is wise, wonderful, knowing and feeling, and has a purpose in his actions? In the end, we all admit and agree that we're obliged to keep the commandments of providence. So the commandments of providence means the laws of nature, because he's saying there's no difference whether you call nature mindless, thoughtless, whether you call it God, whether you call him great, wise, smart. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, we're living in a system that's functioning with laws which are not bendable. They're not going to change. So it doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it God, you can call it nature, you can call it a stupid system, you can call it a wise system. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's functioning in a systematic way which is not going to change. In the end, we all admit and agree that we are obliged to keep the commandments of providence, meaning the laws of nature. And we all admit that one who breaks the commandments of providence, meaning the laws of nature, should be punished by nature and must not be pitied by anyone. Thus the nature of the sentence is the same, and the only difference is in the motive. They maintain that the motive is necessary, and I maintain that it is purposeful. This is a nice statement here by Baal Sulam. Baal Sulam is taking a look from a different perspective. He's saying, oh listen, everything that's happening here, behind creation, people regard it as a motive. Baal Sulam is regarding it as something else, saying this is for a purpose. This is all aimed at something. So the way he's looking at nature, the way he's looking at life, the way he's looking at humanity's progression through thousands of years is by way of purposeful development. So he's saying there must be an aim to this, an objective of the exercise. Okay. To avoid having to use, let's put these glasses back on. To avoid having to use both tongues from now on, nature and a supervisor, between which, as I have shown, there's no difference regarding the following of the laws, is best for us to meet halfway and accept the words of the Kabbalists, that the word hateva, nature, has the same numerical value in Hebrew as Elohim, which is God, 86. Then I will be able to call the laws of God nature's commandments, or vice versa, for they are one and the same, and we need not discuss it further. So he wants to put an end to mindless bickering like children, saying it doesn't matter if you call it God, it doesn't matter if you call it nature, it doesn't matter if you call it whatever. At the end of the day, this is how the system is working. Okay. So let's see. Let's read a little bit more. We've got a few more paragraphs, and then we'll see if there are any questions. Now it is virtually important for us to examine nature's commandments to know what it demands of us, lest it would mercilessly punish us. We have said that nature obligates humankind to lead a social life, and this is simple. But we need to examine the commandment that nature obliges us to keep in that respect, meaning with respect to the social life. So nature obligates us to have a social life, but we also need to evaluate what the laws within that social life are. Okay, so we have to have a social life, like most animals do as well. A lot of animals live in packs, families, groups. So same with us. And he's also saying here, well, that's all good. Okay, that's the law of nature we can keep. But how to work things out within society is also something we need to look into in terms of, from the aspects of laws of nature. In general examination, we find that there are only two commandments or two acts of providences to follow in society. These can be called reception and bestowal. This means that each member must by nature receive his needs from society and must benefit society through his work for its well-being. And if one breaks one of these two commandments, he will be mercilessly punished. We need not excessively examine the commandment of reception, since the punishment is carried out immediately, which prevents any neglect. But in the other commandment, that of bestowal upon society, not only is the punishment not immediate, but it is given indirectly. Therefore, this commandment is not properly observed. Thus, humanity is being fried in a heinous turmoil, and strife and famine, and their consequences have not ceased thus far. And the wonder about it is that nature, like a skillful judge, punishes us according to our development. For we can see that to the extent that humankind develops, the pains and torments surrounding our sustenance and existence also multiply. Thus you have a scientific empirical basis that His providence has commanded us to keep with all our might the commandment of bestowal upon others in utter precision, in such a way that no member from among us would work any less than the measure required to secure the happiness of society and its success. And as long as we are idle, performing it to the fullest, nature will not stop punishing us and take its revenge. And besides the blows we suffer today, we must also consider the drawn sword for the future. The right conclusion must be drawn, that nature will ultimately defeat us, and we will all be compelled to join hands in following its commandments with all the measure required of us. Alright, so this is up to the title, Proof of His Work by Experience. Okay, so let's make note of that. So until now, let's see if we have any questions. Okay. Simon Dorlac is asking, how would a Kabbalist define the founding basis of a social life? Well, it's not a Kabbalist that defines it, Simon. It's a nice question. But it's actually defined by nature. Okay, because we're born in a family. And if you look at how humanity's social structure developed over thousands of years, it's actually a composition of families coming together. First of all, there were big families, then they turned into tribes, and from tribes they turned into nations, kingdoms, countries, and so forth. So the most important thing here is to understand that we need a social life to stay alive, because human beings are not like animals that grow up quickly and within their inherent instinctive behavior can take care of themselves, because humans can't take care of themselves. If you have a baby born, you can't just look after it for a few days or a few months or even a few years and leave it alone. But if you look at the animal kingdom, you take any animal, they grow up immediately. They're just constantly, in a short period of time, depending obviously on the species, like I said, they're able to fend with themselves, they're able to integrate themselves into the community. If you look at chimps, monkeys, they integrate themselves in there because of this instinctive behavior that they have. With humans, we're a more complicated creature. On the one hand, we have to live in society so we can look after ourselves, so we can survive, because on our own it's impossible to do so. And also our happiness, we cannot be happy without a social environment, because we have these basic needs called family, food, shelter. All these things are sex. These are all animate level desires, and they're all inside of us just like a normal animal as well. So these things are a necessity for a person, and all these things are actually supplied to a person by society. So we find our spouse in society, we find our work, how we contribute to society, and in order to actually make a society, we all understand that we need to participate in society in such a way that the whole of the society is taken into account. So in terms of looking at it from a perspective it's not a Kabbalistic perspective, like Bala Salam says in the article as well. Let's just put everything aside for a moment and just look at life, from the way it is. And let's just take into account the laws of nature when we're talking about society. Because until now, although humanity agrees that we need to live in society, we are still rather ignorant as to how to build society. And this is, in fact, this has been a major problem, because we've never been able to build a successful society. We've never been able to build a society where everybody's taken care of, where everybody's happy, where everybody is, in voluntary, happy conformity and willing and understanding why they have to behave, do things in a certain way. There's never been such a developed society. So Bala Islam says, well, listen, enough is enough. Let's start looking at things from the laws of nature rather than making things up as we go along. So it's not so much as a definition of Kabbalists, but these are defined by laws of nature which we need to study and find out. Emre is asking, are we seeking how can we sense nature movements to give us a message, or are we always seeking a message already given to us? Well, we're actually always seeking one thing as a student of Kabbalah: how to integrate ourselves so we can balance with nature. Because right now we're unbalanced, and this lack of balance with us in society and in the connection between everything is causing us all the problems. So what we're really seeking is understanding the laws of nature and then educating ourselves to integrate into those laws of nature so we can have a good balance in society. Francesco De Santo is asking, if a person didn't grow up in a social environment and has trouble socializing, how can a person turn it around? What are the tools in Kabbalah? Well, that's a nice question. Well, even if you didn't grow up in a social environment, you at least must have some minimal contact with a social environment, since we all have to go to work, school, we all have a family or had a family, or we grew up in a social environment, we went to school and so forth. So in any case, a person is connected to society somehow. Somehow we're all connected. Now, whether we get along with the society or we don't is another question. This is actually what Bala Islam is trying to decipher. This is what he's trying to explain to us. He's saying, listen, our major problem is, it's not that we don't understand we're social creatures. We understand we're social creatures, and we understand why we need to be social creatures. But our problem is we don't know how to be correct social creatures among ourselves. And this is why we have a lot of tragedy in humanity, with wars, all kinds of conflicts, murder, rape, all kinds of horrible things that happen in life. Why? Because simply we do not have this this education about how to relate to others in society. So this is what he was referring to here. So in terms of how you can actually correct your social interaction with society is something we all need to study, and we all need to use the group as a Kabbalah group to integrate ourselves in there according to the principles that we learn in the wisdom of Kabbalah, mostly from Rabash. So what does the wisdom of Kabbalah offer us, if you're asking, so that we can actually understand our place in life? Well, first of all, it offers us the explanation of how the world is functioning. It also offers us the knowledge of how human nature is functioning. So from these two perspectives, I'm now able to look at reality from from outside of the box. How nature works, how my nature works, and how these are not, matching each other. They're not flowing, they're not balanced out, but with the study, I have actually the ability to take a look at myself, observe myself from the outside, looking at life and me, myself in life. So to already start to understand these things through studying them is already something really great, because a lot of people live life asking themselves, why did this happen to me? Why me? Why am I not happy? Why like this? Why like that? And then they just grow up and get old and die. Or worse, they end up dead young or depressed without having any answer to their question. So the wisdom of Kabbalah actually offers us this knowledge. The other thing it offers us is the ability to change ourselves through the environment, because as we will study later on in the article freedom of choice or freedom, that we can actually change ourselves with the help of the surrounding. So the wisdom of Kabbalah offers very practical solutions to our societal dilemmas and problems, understanding the cause of the problem and how to solve it by using a correct environment. Francesco is also asking, for example, getting along with a work environment, your boss and similar, or do you include banking systems in the social life? Well, look, if you look at humanity, we can include everything in it, from banks to, I don't know, politicians to factories, shops, your local bakery, to the lawyer, your dentist, your accountant, everything. Why? Because everybody is part of society. Like I said, well, like Bala Salam is saying, our major problem is within society, we do not have the understanding of building proper connections according to the laws of nature. And this is why life is constantly punishing us. Look what we're now facing with this coronavirus. Everybody's stuck at home. We don't know when we're going to go back to work. Everybody's really distressed and stressed out because we have no idea about what the future holds for us. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of people are now unemployed. They've got nothing to go back to. So life is, stepping on us. And as you can see, like we just read a minute ago, is saying life will punish us mercilessly. And you know what? It's doing it. It's doing it. So we need to start understanding how reality works, how laws of nature works, how our laws, human nature works as well, and how we can bring this all to a reconciliation, what we're supposed to do, and how we can go about doing it. So life is not very helpful to us, because as we are more developed, but we are more falling behind as to where we should be. So on the one hand, we're developing in terms of our desire to receive more and more. We've developed, but we haven't really developed to where we should be at in terms of a balanced state with nature or balanced state in society. So as long as we haven't really gotten to that level or that understanding that we even have to change. Still, if you look at many of the politicians that are talking, they're still talking about changing the world. They still don't understand that you can't change the world. The world will change you, but you cannot change the world. Okay, this is still the same dilemma that we're seeing in the United Nations, or the head of the environment in the United Nations. He's saying that we have to take steps because nature is hitting us back. Yeah, that's right, but how are you going to take steps to nature that's hitting you back? How are you going to do that? The only way to do that is to understand how you need to change so that you can come to balance with laws of nature. And until that understanding is not, expanding in society, and until we're all learning it and then applying it, nothing's going to change. So a lot of people out there, politicians, environmentalists, and all these people are jumping up and down and talking. They're missing the big picture here. And the big picture is that humanity has to change the relationships between themselves for nature to be balanced out, because nature is not going to balance out by just us consuming less. 200 years ago we were consuming less. 100 years ago we were consuming less. We had what, problems as well? Were we happier? No, we went through 2 world wars, all kinds of conflicts, diseases, just like we're going through them now. So humanity has to understand that, changing the world is not an option. Changing our relationships is the only option. Francesco is asking again, therefore unemployment is an effect of the cause of not socializing, or is it something that had to happen regardless of society? Unemployment, all the sicknesses in the world, all the wars in the world, all the rapes, the killings, all the evil in the world is simply because we as humanity don't know how to get along with each other according to the laws of nature. This is the only reason for all our problems in life. We don't understand our nature, and we don't understand the laws of general nature, and because we don't understand anything, we're going from one major blow to another until we suffocate ourselves and end up dead. P. Green is asking, why does Kabbalah say the Jews were enslaved by the Egyptians? Historians have stated Jews were never slaves in Egypt, so why was Egypt chosen as the location of the will to receive? Well, Egypt was at that time the greatest civilization. So imagine yourself now being in, I don't know, in the most developed country in the world. Let's say let's say you're living in New York or Los Angeles or Paris or London. It's okay. So you're like living in a really nice place, and your ego is really fulfilled with all of life's pleasures. And that's what Egypt was. So it was a symbol of egoism. It was a symbol of human development. It was a symbol of human achievement. So it symbolized the ego. So in the wisdom of Kabbalah, we're never talking about geography. We're never talking about some historical concept. We're talking about an allegory, about a person's spiritual development. So Egypt is actually our human egoism. And a person who's enslaved to it is a person who's running after worldly desires 24/7. Wants to get rich, wants money, fame, power, sex, knowledge, everything. Good food, good life. He's just running after all these things. And that's it. That's what being a slave to your ego is. You're just running after all these things and you end up dead. With what? Nothing. Because why you end up with nothing? Simply because whatever you get in life, the pleasure and the desire, they cancel each other out. So you can never be happy in life. So you actually end up with nothing. Even if you're really rich, you end up with nothing. First of all, even if you have everything, you get used to that state. So getting used to it is already taking all the taste out of everything and anything you can get your hands on. So this is already a story about spiritual development and about how the dot in the heart inside of us wants to actually break free from Egypt, wants to break free from that slavery. Like a normal person, well, not a normal person, but some people, right? What is some people saying in the 21st century? They're saying, I want to get out of the rat race. This is exactly the same statement as I want to get out of Egypt. Because we're also modern slaves right now. Modern slaves to companies, or to the system, to the capitalism, whatever. If you have any friend that says, I really want to get out of the rat race, he's actually saying the same thing a person would be saying a few thousand years ago if he wanted to develop spiritually in Egypt. Saying, I want to get out of this rat race. Same thing. It's just an allegory. Simon's asking, in a new life, in a new social life, do you not think that it's necessary to reform our tools of economic exchanges, banks, salaries, etc.? We can actually change everything, but without really educating ourselves and understanding, we can't really change anything for the better. So the wisdom of Kabbalah says, listen, we can change the world and make it a great place for everyone. But the first thing we have to do is to sit and learn what it means to be good. Without learning these things, we're just going to make a big mess out of it, like all our predecessors did. Francesco is asking, what's your opinion for post-coronavirus and businesses where companies pushing for profit and budgets? How will society change in merit? Thank you, Martin. Well, Francesco, first of all, I was actually just in a meeting with a few people today about the oil prices. Oil prices went negative for the first time in its history. What does an oil price going negative means? It means I want to sell you my oil, okay, and I'm going to pay you for it. So I'm going to give you my oil and give you money for it. That's how bad the situation is. So oil prices have gone down tremendously. In fact, you know what, let's take a look at it right now. Let's see what Brent is doing right now, because I was following it up today. So let me just open up the platform and let's see where oil is at now. And today Brent is right now is $18.82 on the spot market. And if I look at crude oil, let's see where that is. It went as low as, oh, you're not going to believe this, it went as low as $6.56 today. $6.50 per barrel of oil. That is cheaper than water. It is cheaper than anything you can possibly get. It's probably cheaper than McDonald's right now. Okay, so a barrel of oil is cheaper than getting your basic, I don't know, burger menu at McDonald's. This is like beyond extraordinary. So as you can see, humanity is already starting to feel the agony of it all. We're beginning to understand that the system is not working, and it's not going to work. So life is showing us. So imagine now all these companies who are trading in, who are doing business, right? Imagine all those oil countries. Imagine all those countries who are dependent on oil. Countries like Venezuela. Venezuela is actually the highest oil reserves in the world. It's not Saudi Arabia, it's Venezuela. They're really high oil reserves. And now oil is at $6.50. Let's see, it picked up a little bit after that. It's now what, about 12 bucks. All right, so it went to $6.50, it's now $12.50. So just think about it for a moment. So the whole income of that country is pretty much wiped out, because the cost of getting the oil out, putting it into barrels, refining it, storing it, is all now at a loss. So people who have oil are saying, please take this oil out of my hand and I'll pay you for it. So this is where we're at. So a lot of businesses, how can they be? How can they even exist? So all those people who are working in those industries, all those governments are now pretty much bankrupt. What could they possibly do? So these are pretty challenging times for all of us. So whether a company wants to push for profit or not is absolutely irrelevant. What life is showing us is that nature is relevant and humanity is irrelevant. Because before we thought we had the power to do things the way we want to do them. And now nature is telling us, well, you can't do nothing until I say so. So we're learning a very, very hardcore lesson from nature right now. Okay. So society will have to change. Society will have to learn to take care of each other. Otherwise there won't be a society. We'll just eat each other up. So we're going through some really interesting times, and it's I think a good period for all of us to study the wisdom of Kabbalah so we can actually understand all this. The coronavirus has just, smashed the economy. It has smashed the way we understand life. It has changed us all. We're all going to be living in fear soon, whether we're going to get sick or not. Even if we find a cure for the virus, we can never be sure, because the virus is known for changing and adapting itself and mutating. So how can you, from now on, how can you really go out to the street? How can you really go to a football match? How can you really go out to a restaurant, a cafe, a nightclub? How can you go anywhere? You can't. You're just going to be scared all the time. So this is going to be a really defining moment for humanity, and it is going to be a point of no return where we as humanity will have to find a better way of managing our lives, and we're going to have to make sure that it needs to be good for everyone, because if it's not good for everyone, there's going to be mass conflict, and if we can't settle that, obviously then it could lead to a war, and that would be really scary with the weapons that humanity has. So if we don't fix ourselves properly and do the right changes properly, humanity will just go to another world war like it did many times. But this time it'll wipe us all out. As you can see, nature has no problem in shutting down humanity. Just one little virus and it just shuts down humanity. That's it. So if we all end up, if 8 billion people, all of a sudden 6-7 billion of us die, for nature it's not a problem, because we've been quarantined at home for 2 months, and all the fish are back, all the wild animals are flourishing in nature, the air is cleaner, life goes back to normal in nature as soon as nature wants it to happen that way. And if we're going to remain stubborn children, we'll just end up in a war, and that's it. 8 billion humanity will just be what, 500, 600 million. The rest will end up dead, and we'll have to start from caveman period once again, because that's what will happen. So hopefully we'll learn fast, and we'll make the proper changes as Baba Salam writes, because these are very, very important, especially now that we're entering this phase in a global way. In the interim, hopefully you'll also enjoy this article. These are very deep articles about our history, our development, and all the things that we have to do. And hopefully we'll continue next week as well. I'll just take one last question from Simon. Don't you fear that this could be an opportunity to establish a totalitarian system? Not really. I'm not afraid that it would be a totalitarian system, because I don't think it'll work. It won't work. I think humanity has come to such a state where it's not going to have much tolerance to these things. Such such regimes like fascism might be on the rise, but the reason is not because of its totalitarianism. The reason it may be rising is so that they can arrange this mess. So I'm not so scared about the totalitarian, totalitarian aspect of it, um, because if countries can't find a way to fix this mess, they'll seek out a system which is, which is a strong-handed system, so it'll work top down in order to sort society out. This is the only time we can get totalitarian, when the society is in crises and it can't find a way to get out. But if humanity finds a way, if it comes to an understanding that we can all actually just integrate ourselves to a better future by working together, then it doesn't need to go that way at all. We just need a small shift in understanding. And also, being afraid of what might happen in the future is rather redundant. It doesn't really help us with anything. As students of the wisdom of Kabbalah, what we should really focus on is what we can do right now to make things better. Because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't even know if I'm going to live tomorrow. So we don't know. So the best approach is always to do the best we can in order to educate people, educate ourselves as well, educate society, and raise society's consciousness so that society can make a conscious shift rather than an unconscious one through suffering. And actually, shifts through suffering don't bring consciousness to a person. It's not a higher level of understanding, it's just running away from misery and pain. So hopefully our work and our constant efforts to tell humanity about what the problem is and how we can solve it will help greatly in easing this transition for everyone. Alright everyone, so next week we'll carry on with the subtitle Proof of His Work by Experience. Am I correct? Okay, good. We'll carry on with this article next week. Like I said, it's a long one. It'll take a few weeks, but it will give us a great understanding on how to work in a group and how to build the society around us. Until then, all the best. Take care. Have a great day or an evening, depending where you are. Bye now.